That block of cream cheese in your fridge right now, it's not what you think it is. What Australian families are spreading on their morning bagels contains ingredients that have been linked to hormone disruption, inflammatory diseases, and chemicals banned in multiple countries. But here in Australia, they're perfectly legal, sitting in your supermarket dairy aisle right now. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to expose exactly which 10 cream cheese brands you need to avoid and why. I'll show you what's really in them, what it's doing to your body, and most importantly, what you should be buying instead. And wait until you see number 4. What we discovered will genuinely shock you. By the end of this, you'll never grab the same tub again. Number 10. Coles Spreadable Cream Cheese. Let's start with Australia's second largest supermarket chain and their house brand cream cheese. That familiar red label, the budget-friendly price point. Looks harmless enough, right? Here's what they don't tell you. Open up the ingredients list and you'll find modified starch as the third ingredient. That's not cream. That's chemically altered corn or potato starch used to bulk up the product and save money on actual dairy. Modified starch is created by treating regular starch with acids, enzymes, or heat to change its properties. This process can involve chemicals like propylene oxide, classified as a probable carcinogen by international health agencies. The cream cheese also contains food acid 472. That's tartaric acid, often derived from industrial waste products. While approved for use, studies suggest regular consumption can interfere with mineral absorption in your gut. Coles Spreadable also includes thickener 407. That's carrageenan, extracted from seaweed. Sounds natural until you learn that degraded carrageenan has been linked to inflammatory bowel disease in laboratory studies. Research published in the Journal of Diabetes Research found connections between carrageenan consumption and glucose intolerance. The sodium content sits at 200 milligrams per 30 gram serving. When you're spreading it on toast for breakfast, bagels for lunch, and using it in pasta for dinner, you're consuming 600 to 900 milligrams of sodium just from cream cheese alone. That's nearly half your daily recommended limit. Coles charges around $4.50 for a 250 gram tub. You're paying for modified starch and thickeners while getting less actual cream than premium brands. Number 9. Woolworths Cream Cheese. Australia's largest supermarket chain, the green and white branding you see everywhere. The everyday low price promise. Woolies cream cheese sits in millions of Australian fridges right now. The reality is far less reassuring. The first red flag appears immediately in the ingredient list. Water is listed as the second ingredient, right after cream. That means there's more water in this product than actual cheese. They're literally diluting your cream cheese and charging you for it. To make this watered down mixture hold together, they add multiple thickeners. Thickener 410, 407 and 415. Locust bean gum, carrageenan and xanthan gum. Studies from the University of Illinois found that even food-grade carrageenan can trigger inflammatory responses in the digestive system. For Australians with IBS, Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, this additive could be actively making symptoms worse. Woolworths Essentials contains preservative 202, potassium sorbate. Research found that potassium sorbate can cause DNA damage in human cells when combined with vitamin C. And guess what else is in many cream cheese recipes? Lemon juice, which contains vitamin C. The sodium levels match Coles at around 200 milligrams per serving, but the serving size Woolworths lists is smaller than what most people actually use. That tablespoon and a half on your morning toast is actually 2 servings according to the label, so you're getting 400 milligrams of sodium before you've even added anything else to your breakfast. Number 8. Philadelphia Light, the most recognised cream cheese brand in Australia, the light version that seems like the healthy choice. Philadelphia Light markets itself as better for you, lower in fat. Sounds good, right? Here's what they don't advertise. When you remove fat from cream cheese, you lose texture and flavour. So how do manufacturers compensate? With additives, lots of them. Philadelphia Light contains modified food starch and multiple stabilizers. It includes significantly more sodium than regular Philadelphia, around 320 milligrams per 30 gram serving. That's 60% more sodium than the full fat version. Why? Because when you remove fat, you remove flavour. Manufacturers add salt to compensate. Modern nutrition science shows that full-fat dairy can actually support weight management better than low-fat alternatives because the fat helps you feel satisfied. When you eat Philadelphia Light, you're getting less satisfaction, more hunger, signals, and more likelihood you'll eat additional food to compensate. The light version costs the same as regular Philadelphia, sometimes more. You're paying the same price for a product stripped of natural ingredients and loaded with additives to make up for what was removed. Number 7, Bega cream cheese. The iconic Australian brand, the yellow label that represents Aussie dairy heritage, the company that's been part of Australian agriculture for decades. Bega should be trustworthy, right? It's an Australian-owned cooperative supporting local farmers. Surely they're making quality cream cheese. The branding certainly suggests that. Here's what the fine print reveals. Bega cream cheese contains thickener 407 and 415. That's carrageenan and xanthan gum again. Why does an Australian dairy cooperative need to add thickeners to their cream cheese? Because they're using less cream and more water than traditional cream cheese requires. It's a cost-cutting measure that allows them to maintain profit margins while delivering an inferior product. The sodium content sits at 280 milligrams per 30 gram serving. That's higher than both Coles and Woolworths house brands. For a product that markets itself on Australian quality and heritage, that's a concerning amount of added salt. What makes this particularly disappointing is Bega's position in Australian dairy. They have access to some of the best dairy farms in the country. Australian dairy is world-renowned for quality, yet their cream cheese ingredient list reads like a factory formulation designed for shelf stability and profit maximisation rather than showcasing the quality of Australian cream. Bega charges premium pricing compared to supermarket house brands, around $5.50 for a 250 gram tub in most stores. You're paying more because of the Australian heritage branding and the assumption that local means better. The ingredients tell a different story. Same thickeners, same preservatives, same cost-cutting measures as the budget brands, just with better marketing. But wait until you see what we found in number 6. This brand has a contamination history that most Australian consumers have never heard about. Before we continue, take a second to hit that subscribe button. It helps push this investigation to the people who need to see it. Let's keep going. Number 6, Dairy Farmers Cream Cheese. Another iconic Australian brand, the red and white packaging that's been in Australian supermarkets since the 1970s. The promise of supporting Australian dairy farmers. The branding creates an image of wholesome, locally sourced dairy products made by real farmers who care about quality. Except Dairy Farmers isn't owned by Australian farmers anymore. It's owned by Lactalis, a French multinational corporation. The same company that's faced multiple contamination scandals in Europe. In 2017, Lactalis products in France were contaminated with salmonella, leading to one of the largest baby formula recalls in history. 35 infants were hospitalised. The contamination was traced back to renovation work at their French production facility, where proper hygiene protocols weren't followed. Now, Dairy Farmers cream cheese sold in Australia hasn't had documented contamination incidents. But the parent company's track record raises serious questions about quality control standards and corporate priorities. When profit margins matter more than food safety, corners get cut, and Australian consumers are left trusting a brand that's no longer what its name suggests. The ingredient list contains modified starch as the third ingredient. Just like the supermarket house brands, you're paying around $5 for a product that's been bulked up with chemically altered starch instead of actual cream. The thickener lineup includes 401, 407 and 415. Sodium alginate, carrageenan and xanthan gum. That's 3 different thickeners in one product. Why? Because when you're using less cream and more water and modified starch, you need multiple agents to create a texture that resembles real cream cheese. The preservative used is 202, potassium sorbate, same as Woolworth's Essentials. Same potential for DNA damage when combined with vitamin C. Same lack of disclosure about these interactions on the label. Australian food standards don't require manufacturers to warn consumers about potential chemical interactions between additives. You're expected to trust that approved means safe under all circumstances. Dairy Farmers charges premium pricing based on its Australian heritage branding and the emotional connection Australians have with supporting local farmers. But the product you're getting is owned by a French corporation, formulated with the same additives as budget brands and sold at prices that don't reflect the actual quality inside the tub. It's marketing exploitation of Australian agricultural identity for corporate profit. Number 5. Devondale Cream Cheese. The name itself evokes pastoral Australian dairy farms, rolling green hills, happy cows grazing in sunshine. Devondale is owned by Murray Goulburn, or was until the cooperative collapsed in 2017 amid one of the biggest financial scandals in Australian agricultural history. The company overpaid farmers, created unsustainable debt, then demanded hundreds of thousands of dollars back from family farms that had already spent the money. Dairy farmers lost their livelihoods. Some lost their farms. The emotional and financial devastation rippled through rural communities across Victoria and New South Wales. Murray Goulburn was eventually acquired by Canadian dairy giant Saputo, so that Australian-sounding Devondale brand is now foreign-owned, just like dairy farmers. The cream cheese itself contains the standard industrial lineup: modified starch, multiple thickeners, preservatives. Nothing that distinguishes it from budget supermarket brands except the price and the packaging. Devondale charges around $5.80 for a 250-gram tub. You're paying more for a brand name that no longer represents what it once did. The sodium content sits at 260 milligrams per serving, not the highest we've tested, but still significant when you consider how often cream cheese appears in Australian diets. Breakfast spreads, lunch wraps, pasta sauces, dinner recipes, desserts. It adds up fast. What bothers me about Devondale is the betrayal of trust. Australian consumers bought this brand because they believed they were supporting Australian dairy farmers. The reality is they were enriching a cooperative that ultimately failed those same farmers spectacularly. And now they're enriching a Canadian corporation that's using the Devondale name to exploit that emotional connection while delivering a product that's indistinguishable from cheaper alternatives. Number 4, Kraft Philadelphia Original. And here we are. Number 4, the brand that terrified us when we dug into the research. Philadelphia is the global cream cheese giant owned by Kraft Heinz, one of the largest food corporations in the world. The blue packaging is instantly recognizable. It's in practically every Australian supermarket, every convenience store, every petrol station. It's the default cream cheese choice for millions of Australians. And what we found about this product is genuinely disturbing. Let's start with something most Australians have never heard of. In 2021, Kraft Heinz recalled thousands of Philadelphia cream cheese products in the United States due to potential salmonella contamination. The recall affected multiple states and numerous product varieties. The company issued quiet notifications through FDA channels, but there was no major public awareness campaign. Most American consumers who'd purchased the affected products never even knew about the recall. Now, that recall was specific to American production facilities and didn't directly affect Australian supply. But here's what should concern every Australian. Kraft Heinz operates manufacturing facilities around the world using similar processes and quality control standards. If contamination can happen in American facilities, what's preventing it from happening in facilities that supply Australia? Food Standards Australia New Zealand requires recalls to be publicly listed, but only after contamination is discovered and reported. There's no proactive transparency about near misses, failed quality checks, or internal safety concerns. You only find out when something goes catastrophically wrong. And by then, you've potentially been consuming contaminated product for weeks or months. But the contamination risk is just the beginning. Look at what's actually in Philadelphia Original. The ingredient list includes milk, cream, salt, cheese culture, and stabilizers. Sounds relatively simple compared to other brands we've covered, but those stabilizers hide a multitude of additives. Stabilizer 407 is carrageenan. We've discussed the inflammatory bowel concerns, but there's more. Research published in Environmental Health Perspectives found that carrageenan exposure in utero and during infancy can lead to impaired glucose tolerance later in life. For pregnant Australian women eating Philadelphia on their morning toast, this is a developmental risk factor that's never mentioned on the packaging. For mothers feeding cream cheese to their toddlers, they're potentially programming metabolic dysfunction that won't manifest until their children are adults. Philadelphia also contains food acid 330. That's citric acid, which seems harmless. Citrus fruits contain citric acid naturally, so it must be fine, right? Wrong. The citric acid used in processed foods is not extracted from lemons or oranges. It's produced through industrial fermentation using Aspergillus niger, a black mold. While the final product is chemically identical to natural citric acid, the production process can leave trace amounts of mold proteins and mycotoxins. For Australians with mold allergies or sensitivities, this hidden source of exposure can trigger chronic inflammation, headaches, respiratory problems, and digestive issues. They'll never connect it to their morning cream cheese because nobody tells them that citric acid comes from mold. The sodium content in Philadelphia Original is 310 milligrams per 30 gram serving. That's among the highest we've tested. 2 tablespoons of cream cheese, which is a reasonable amount on a bagel, gives you 620 milligrams of sodium. That's over a quarter of your daily recommended limit in one component of one meal. For Australians with high blood pressure, heart disease, or kidney problems, this level of sodium is medically dangerous. Yet Philadelphia markets itself as a wholesome, family-friendly product suitable for everyone from toddlers to seniors. What makes Philadelphia particularly troubling is its market dominance. It's the default choice. When recipes call for cream cheese, they mean Philadelphia. When cafes make cheesecake, they use Philadelphia. When parents pack school lunches, Philadelphia goes on the bagels. Millions of Australians consume this product multiple times per week, completely unaware of the additives, the sodium, the potential contamination risks, and the inflammatory compounds they're eating. Kraft Heinz reported over $26 billion in revenue in 2023. They're optimizing every product for maximum profit. That means cheaper ingredients, longer shelf life, wider distribution. Your health isn't part of that equation. Your repeat purchases are. And Philadelphia's addictive combination of fat, salt, and creamy texture engineered in laboratories keeps you coming back week after week, year after year. That's number 4. And we're not done yet. Wait until you see what the remaining brands are hiding. Number 3, Tatura cream cheese. The Victorian dairy brand that promises natural goodness from the rich pastures of the Goulburn Valley. Tatura plays heavily on its regional Australian identity. The idea that buying Tatura means supporting Victorian dairy farmers and getting a product made with care in regional Australia. The reality is considerably less romantic. Tatura is owned by Fonterra, a New Zealand-based dairy cooperative that's one of the largest dairy companies in the world. They operate across 40 countries with annual revenue exceeding 20 billion New Zealand dollars. This isn't a small Victorian dairy. It's a tentacle of a global dairy empire. The ingredient list reveals modified food starch in the 3rd position, just like nearly every other brand we've examined. Tatura contains thickeners 401, 407 and 415. The same trio of sodium alginate, carrageenan and xanthan gum that appears across the industry. For a brand that markets itself on natural goodness and regional quality, the formulation is identical to mass-market budget options. The only difference is the price. Tatura charges around $5.90 for 250 grams. That's premium pricing for a commodity product with standard industrial additives. The sodium content sits at 290 milligrams per 30 gram serving. Combined with the modified starch and triple thickener combination, what you're getting is water, thickeners and salt, with just enough cream to legally qualify as cream cheese. The natural goodness branding is pure marketing fiction. What's particularly deceptive about Tatura is the packaging. The green and white design, the pastoral imagery, the emphasis on Victorian dairy heritage. It creates an emotional connection with consumers who want to support regional Australia and buy products they believe are made with integrity. But you're actually buying from a New Zealand multinational using Australian branding to charge premium prices for standard formulations. It's agricultural identity theft in service of corporate profit margins. Number 2, Mainland cream cheese, another New Zealand import that dominates Australian supermarket shelves. Mainland is also owned by Fonterra, the same company behind Tatura. So when you choose between Tatura and Mainland, thinking you're making a different choice, you're actually buying from the same corporation, using different branding strategies for market segmentation. Mainland's ingredient list includes cheese, cream, water, thickeners and preservatives. Notice that cheese appears first, which sounds promising until you realise they don't specify what kind of cheese or what percentage. It could be 5% cheese, 90% water and thickeners, and the labelling would still be legally accurate. The thickener combination includes 407, 410 and 415. Carrageenan, locust bean gum and xanthan gum. 3. Different agents working together to create texture that should come naturally from cream and cheese. Mainland also includes preservative 234. That's nisin, derived from bacterial fermentation. While approved for use, nisin is an antibiotic peptide. Regular consumption of antibiotic compounds in food, even in small amounts, contributes to antibiotic resistance. This is one of the most serious public health threats globally. When you eat Mainland cream cheese regularly, you're exposing your gut bacteria to antibiotic compounds. Over time, this can select for resistant bacterial strains, making real antibiotics less effective when you actually need them for illness. The sodium content reaches 330 milligrams per 30 gram serving. That's the highest we've tested. For Australians eating Mainland daily, this represents a significant cardiovascular risk factor. Australian Heart Foundation guidelines recommend limiting sodium to 2,000 milligrams per day. Just 3 servings of Mainland cream cheese consume half that limit. Add in bread, butter, lunch meat, dinner, and you're easily exceeding safe sodium levels every single day. Mainland charges around $6 for 250 grams, making it one of the most expensive cream cheeses in Australian supermarkets. You're paying premium prices for triple thickeners, preservative antibiotics, and dangerous sodium levels. The New Zealand branding creates an assumption of quality, but the ingredients reveal industrial food manufacturing optimised for profit, not health.